Chair Roybal as excused.
Yes, and we'll acknowledge him when he joins.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair Hamilton.
I'm here.
Okay, so you have quorum.
Did we call? Oh,
You missed one.
Hughes?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Commissioner Hughes.
I'm here too.
Thank you very much.
He's probably looking, Madam Chair is probably looking for that Bobcat. But I'm sure
Yeah.
it's not.
Looking for it.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. I marked you down, but I didn't say your name. I apologize.
It's the little things sometimes. So the next would be 1C, approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair?
Manager Miller, is there any, are there any changes we need to note to the agenda?
If I may, I would like to switch the order so that we do item B, the budget discussion before the strategic planning updates, just to make sure that we have time to go through the budget, since that's a statutory deadline.
Well, if there are no objections, oh, there are other changes? I'm sorry.
No, just to switch the order of the two, if that would be okay.
No problem. If there are no other objections to that, what's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair, so move. This is Rudy.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. So I have a first and a second. I'll guess. Madam Clerk, can you do the roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Commissioner Anna Hansen.
Yes.
Commissioner Rudy Garcia.
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
And Chair Hamilton.
Yes. Thank you. So that'll take us to item 2, the presentations and budget development, and we'll do 2B first. 2022 budget preparation. Manager Miller, I'll just go right to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Some of this is a repeat of what we discussed. I'm going to pull it up on my screen as well. So some of this is a repeat of the introduction in the last budget study session, but I just want to always go back to how we prepare the budget and how we work with the departments and the elected officials. We start with looking at our strategic plan and our population goals of providing a safer community, promoting a sustainable community, supporting a healthy community, and being a proficient, transparent, and accessible government. So those underlie much of what is in the department and elected official budget requests. Oh, Daniel, next slide, please. Now the next one. Also, out of our April 8th and April 9th strategic planning discussions, while we did not by any means finish updating the strategic plan, and actually now that we've accumulated a lot of the information from those 2 days, I think that we need to have more extensive meetings to get through kind of rewriting the plan and maybe making it a 2021 through 2026 plan, or 22 through 26 plan. So, so that's why I wanted to move that to the second item. But much of what came out of those conversations was a lot of focus on affordable housing opportunities, climate change concerns and sustainability efforts, economic and community development opportunities, with more focus on broadband and recreational opportunities, employee training and development, and competitive employee compensation, fire prevention and risk mitigation, in public safety through crime prevention, improved response times, increased coverage and staff training at our facilities, expanded behavioral health services, drought mitigation, and water supply security, to name a few of the top priorities. Next slide, please. Overall, as we go through this budget presentation, I've left the presentation to give you overall projections for FY21 and FY22 in revenues, recurring revenues and non-recurring, and also what we see as estimated non-recurring cash balances out of the current fiscal year, and then expenditures, recurring operational, fixed assets, maintenance, projects and debt services. And then also I broke out the budget into recurring revenues versus recurring expenditures and some debt, and then one-time capital purchases with cash funding, and then also debt service revenues, sources, and expenditures. Just a note, sorry, just wanted to point out that note at the bottom that we once again, we're not going over capital projects and budgeting for capital projects. We did in July of 2020, prior to the November elections. We went through an exhaustive list of all of our capital projects that we had already some funding for. We completed the funding for those projects, as well as we added 21 million in general obligation bonds, 20 million in GO bonds, and another 1.2 million in GRT funding and those other sources. That said, we will bring back to you before we finish submitting the budget to DFA where we stand on all of those projects, what budget is remaining on those projects that needs to roll into the next fiscal year, as well as what was in that $20 million of GO bond, just to remind you that we will be budgeting starting July 1. Next slide, please. This is the FY21 and 22 overall revenue projections. And I say projections because we're still, 2 months out of finishing this fiscal year. And then we're trying to update that data as we go. If you notice, we actually updated FY21 at 427 instead of 331. 17, 18, 19 and 20, those are actuals. That's not budget, but that's actuals. And then 21, this is what we project in the way of revenues. And then the preliminary projections for FY22. Now you might be looking like, why such a big difference? If you notice, we don't have the capital GOB or GRT bond issues in the number for FY22. Next slide, please. Then FY21 and FY22 overall expenditure projections. So 17, 18, 19, and 20, those were our actual expenditures by category. So we budget by department and elected official office, as well as by category. This is all of those rolled up into salaries and wages and benefits, insurance, or self-insurance, health insurance, training, travel. So you can see this is our projected expenditures, and FY21, you can see where we're definitely to date, we are lower than we were in FY20 and projected to be lower than we were in FY20. FY20 expenditures were definitely up over 19. Some of that being capital projects and debt service, but also just a reminder that we did have, that's when we fully implemented one of our GRT increments and got all the individuals hired. So we had brought some additional things into the budget in 19 that was not in 18 in those areas, and in the area of salaries and whatnot. And then we didn't, we started the hiring freeze very late in FY20. So we had quite a bit of expenditures before we shut down spending in FY 20. But in 21, you can see we had a significantly reduced budget and we've had a significantly reduced expenditures. And if you look at FY 22 preliminary budget, we are estimating to be higher than all of the, all previous years in salaries and benefits. And that's because we did budget to have everybody fully staffed. So we budgeted at actuals for any position that's filled and midpoint for any position that's vacant. That did push up those numbers, but it does give the departments flexibility in making sure that they can fill their positions and hopefully keep them filled. And it also will give departments and elected officials' offices some wiggle room relative to being able to give merit increases next year. They utilize what we call salary savings. So when they have somebody who leaves and they hire in at a lower salary, they are able to use that difference to provide merit increases for their staff, or to hire in another position maybe higher than what they have budget for. Next slide, please. So this is FY 21, where we are through 427. And this is right off of the system. As you can see, we're about 88% collected, and we still have 2 months to go. The big difference out of that 14.7 million left to collect to meet budget, 12 million of that is in property tax. We do anticipate being on target with property tax. We're in our second half of the year in collections. So April and May, which get distributed in May and June, are two of our highest months of property tax collection, along with November, December, which get distributed in January and February. So we think that is looking good. We also see the GRT is better than originally projected, and we still have 2 months of GRT to collect. Also, health premiums, we still have 4 million to collect on that, but that's a matter of payroll. Those are premiums taken out during payroll. Also, grants. Our grants, quite often we get we work on a reimbursement basis, so we still have to bill for our grants. And then investment income, we already had anticipated. If you recall, in the previous slides, we were getting $4.5–5 million a year for investment income. We knew coming into 2021 that was not going to be the case. The interest rate environment just wasn't there. So we had already anticipated that. So we do think we will hit our 2 million and maybe have a little bit of buffer there. The one area not sure that we will hit is the licenses, permits, and fees. Partly that's a good hunk of that was due to the fact that we did free trash for several months. So that probably accounts for about 200,000 of that we did not receive, versus the corresponding expenditure of having quite a bit more solid waste. Next slide, please. Then here is what we're looking at in the way of recurring expenditures year to date. You can see that salaries and benefits are not at 75%, which we would expect to see about now. That's due to the hiring freeze. We did lift the hiring freeze, but it has taken a while for those positions to get filled. So we do anticipate having a favorable year end as opposed to a deficit in any budget category. We anticipate we'll come out with less of our budget expended than we have budgeted. Next slide, please. Then this is debt service projections for FY21, and I'll show you the 21 versus 22. So this is where we have GRT bond issues, and we have GOB, and we just issued the new GOB 20 million. So we will likely see a slight increase in that. But the big increase in that GOB debt won't really come into play until July 1st of 2023. No, calendar year, July 1st, calendar year 22, but that's fiscal year 23. And then we're paying down our GRT debt, and we have not issued any new GRT debt. What we do have in the way, and so the transfers in are where we receive revenue, for instance, in capital outlay GRT. So we get capital outlay GRT, and about 5 million of that goes to pay for BDD. And so then we transfer it out of the capital outlay GRT and transfer it into the debt service. So when you see the transfers in, that's for payments for the bonds that we have for the jail, bonds we have for the courthouse, bonds we have for BDD, and bonds we have for the 2 buildings downtown, plus the road settlement agreements. Next slide, please. So this is the recurring. So the previous slides were kind of budget in total. Then we pull out those revenues that are made predominantly for capital purchases. That would be the capital outlay GRT, which is roughly $10 million a year, that revenue. That can only be spent on capital projects by law. And by our ordinance, we put it in place under the previous law. Also, we have the increment that was put in place to fund the first hold harmless increment 1/8. That's about 4.5 million or so. That goes to fund the debt service on these 2 buildings at 100 Katrin and 102 Grant. So we take those revenues out as well. And we take out other grants that are non-recurring grants. So you see that line, grants in green. Those are the grants that we get, like the DWI grants, housing, things that are, and grants that we get on a regular basis with the sheriff's office, our DOJ grants, but we pulled out those one-time grants that we don't know that we're going to get, not our recurring grants. And those are things like capital outlay grants from the state, as well as the CARES Act. So these are recurring revenues that can be used for recurring expenditures. Just a reminder, we always have to build our budget where our recurring revenues, our recurring expenditures do not exceed our recurring revenues. And if they do, we have to show to DFA, yes, we're using cash to plug that gap, but we also have our plan for how that's not going to be carried out over time because it's not sustainable. So we have 140. So when you take out those revenues that I just spoke about, we have about $145 million estimated revenues next year. You can see the areas where we still think we may not be back up to pre-pandemic levels in property tax, in GRT, in hold harmless distributions, in investment income, and care of prisoners are the main ones that we do not think those will be fully back until we're out of this economic environment. Next slide, please. Then we have, so these are the department requests. These are as submitted by the departments. And as we went through the department hearings and elected official office hearings, if there was something we thought could be cut at that particular time, we discussed it and with agreement took that out. So these are the ones, this is where they stand after those hearings with those discussions. And that's the recurring requests. So it does not have, this does not have fixed assets or one-time requests or a one-time capital request. And when I say capital request, an example is the clerk had a request, which we'll talk about later, but it's not a recurring request. So those equal also about 145 million. I think we're about $70,000 off there, somewhere in that range. Also, this does not include any kind of cost of living adjustment, one-time payment, insurance premiums, or otherwise. Now, I think, let me just double check. So at the bottom of this slide, Daniel, can you, oh, go to the next slide, please. So this is by category, and then this is by department. So the first line was department request, or the first slide was department requests by category, so salaries, benefits, all rolled up. This is actually by department. So this is broken down by each department as well as the elected officials' offices. So you can see their total budget requests, and that's recurring to recurring, and how they compare over over the years. And we anticipate also, you know, obviously these are higher across the board than FY20 actuals, and that's pretty typical, by the way. That's pretty typical in the county that I said we really, the biggest difference is in salaries and benefits, where we fund based upon actuals and vacancies, and then we don't hold a vacancy rate, as well as we fully fund benefits. But also, if you look by department, if you look back over the years to actuals, most of the departments do not spend what they get budgeted. And Daniel, could you go back one slide? And if you look here, you can see the categories where that typically happens, where a budget is higher than the actuals. And so if you just even looked at FY20's numbers, and then you can see that the requests are quite a bit higher than actuals. And that, and the areas that we end up having probably our most wiggle room is salaries and benefits. And that's because once you do have a vacancy, we don't allow departments to then spend that money. We keep that to fall to cash to fund the fixed asset one-time requests in the following year. And you'll see how that plays out further down in the budget. Okay, slide 13, please. Oh, I'm sorry, please go back to slide 12. If you could, Daniel, now go to attachment number 1, in the appendices. So I didn't put the last study session. We went through all of the department highlights. I didn't leave each one of those slides. I moved that for your reference as an appendix so that we wouldn't go through all of these, but this is what is in their budgets that's of note, that isn't just typical supplies or the regular maintenance, copier maintenance, utilities, electric, all of that. These were some of the initiatives that also tie back to the strategic plan. One of the things that you might have noticed in the manager's budget, there's quite a bit of a bigger number in the budget versus the actuals of previous years. That's always where the county's contingency funding is held, is in finance, in case we have a flood, you know, and a fire, a major snowstorm, and we need a lot of overtime. There's always a contingency of around $2.5 to $3 million in the manager's budget, but we don't use that unless there's an emergency. So that's why you always see that difference between actuals and difference. But as you can see, this is that same list that I went through in detail at the last study session, listing out all of the things that, oh, I'm glad you stopped on that. Right now, so if you can see under utilities, we are working with the city. We had an agreement with the city. We had paid a one-time fee 5 years ago for wheeling water through the city's water system. They have given us a fee of, I think it's $1.39 per thousand, that, or $1.29 per thousand, that they say, based on their rate study, is the cost. But John Dupuy is working with the city on that issue, because we believe that a good portion of the water that we wheel through the city system is really just up to the tank and back. And so we're working with them, and so I don't know if that will be the number or not, but it's a significant number because that is where most of our water is wheeled through that small portion of their system. And I don't know, John, I saw you on here. Did you want to add to that at all?
No, ma'am, I think that's correct. We're working on the amount, and for that portion, we may be able to obtain a lower cost. I think you explained that well. Okay.
And we will bring that back to the board. That's obviously an agreement we have to have with the city. And then I think, as I said, we pointed out all the different initiatives we have going on, new grants that we're working on, the opioid grant that's between fire and CSD. So those are the major things that are different than regular, like I said, than salaries, benefits, utilities, fuel, all of that is built in the department budgets by category, by line item, by category. And then these are the items that are particular, that are of note to the different departments. Okay, thank you, Daniel. If you could go back to the presentation. But I just wanted to let the board know that's where those slides went. I didn't get rid of them. We just moved them out of the main presentation. And they are what make up the majority of what I'll call discretionary requests within the department and elected officials' budgets. The rest of the stuff I would call non-discretionary. It's just what it takes to operate the county to do what we do on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So what's not also in the individual department requests is any kind of new compensation package. And in the last presentation, I mentioned that if you look by what's already been submitted in estimated revenues to estimated expenditures, we're pretty much right on target, but that did not leave room for any kind of compensation package. Unfortunately, and I've arranged this presentation in a way that hopefully will be logical to you. It was logical to me, but that doesn't make it logical to everyone else. But we still do not have guidelines from the federal government on our direct distribution of the $14 million that we're supposed to get next month. Actually, in less than 2 weeks, they've said we would receive it, but we don't know how we can spend it yet. So that's a little frustrating because I had confidence we would have that before presenting a recommended interim budget to you. So what I had to do now is try to separate an interim budget without those guidelines and without any federal money, and then start to piece in, if we get the guidelines, what I would recommend we add to this budget. So this at the moment, I believe this piece we can accomplish without the federal funds. So what I'm going to present is a budget without any federal funds. And then when we get the guidelines, what I think we could still do and how we could do it. So, so this is one that all commissioners indicated they were interested in seeing us bring our lowest category of salary ranges up. So we don't have any employees at the county that earn the county minimum wage of $12.90 something, I think it is now, but we do have some at 13. It's not many, but we do. And then we have some between $13 and $15. And what I had heard from the commission was a desire to get our employees up to $15 an hour. I think that that's something that we can do over the next 2 fiscal years pretty, I don't want to say easily, but systematically, and make that happen regardless of what happens at a state minimum wage or a federal minimum wage level. And do that by doing a 50-cent increase to anyone who is less than $15 an hour. Do a 50-cent increase effective July 1st, 21, so the very beginning of the fiscal year, and then another one at the end of the fiscal year. And I say that because then you're actually, in approving this budget, you're approving both increases, and they would be built into the base before we even start doing fiscal year 23. So it'd be 50 cents on July 1, and then 50 cents on June 29th, 2022. As you can see, the first 50 cents cost the county $161,000, and the second 50 cents will be $134,000 on a recurring basis. Also, and later down, we would look at what would happen if we do COLAs. But COLAs are across the whole county, and they're much more costly. This one, I think we can target the lowest paid employees and make sure we bring their salaries up. Next slide, please. Then what we can do for everybody without any knowledge of the rescue plan guidelines is a one-time payment to all employees. Now, what we looked at on this one was doing no less than $1,000 and a maximum of $2,400, but in between that, employees would receive $10 for each month that they have been employed at the county. Now, these are for non-probationary employees, so that's employees who have been with the county for a year or more. And we would do this as a one-time payment, but distributed between 4 to 6 pay periods. So we've done this before. Now, you might be wondering, why can't we just do one, give them one lump sum? This is a statutory issue. And it has to do with anti-donation. Anybody who works for the county has already agreed to work for the county at the salary they make. So they make $15 an hour and they work and they've been paid to do that work. If you then give a one-time lump sum as a bonus, then you're saying, I'm now paying you more than $15 an hour for the time you worked before. The reason we spread it out over multiple pay periods is we're saying over these 4 to 6 pay periods, we're going to pay you more. And so that's why it's structured like that. These would be based upon, the amounts would be based upon income level. So anybody who is equal to or $40,000, that would be tier 1. They would get a minimum of $1,200 plus the $10 per month. That's 223 employees that fall into that category. Tier 2 would be $40,001 to $75,000. That's 460. That's the bulk of our employees. They would get a minimum of $1,100 plus $10 per month or with the county. And then tier 3, those who make $75,000, over $75,000, a minimum of $1,000 and $10 per month, up to a maximum of $2,400. You can see what the average turns out to be per employee, but the idea was also to try to make sure that there was a minimum of $1,200 per employee that was under $40,000. Also, to note, collective bargaining, we have several collective bargaining agreements out right now and up for negotiation. Each bargaining unit has a right to negotiate the way that compensation would be paid. So while we can determine the amount per bargaining unit based on this formula and the employees within that bargaining unit, we would actually just give that equivalent funding to the negotiating teams to determine how they want to do it. So for instance, maybe the fire department just wants it to be equal, and they had 100 employees and there's $200,000. They might want just $2,000 per employee instead of some at $2,400 and others at $1,600. But that's just so you know, that's what that last bullet, collective bargaining units will negotiate distribution. They may be fine with the way we calculated it, but they also may want to negotiate it differently. Next slide, please. If they wanted to negotiate it differently, here's how it breaks out by bargaining unit. AFSCME blue collar, though, does not have a economic reopener in the near future. So we would likely just distribute to them based upon the formula. Same with non-union individuals. And then corrections, medical, firefighters, dispatch, and sheriffs would have those amounts and have the opportunity to decide how they wanted that distributed, if they have an economic reopener or a new contract. Next slide. Also, one of the things that I had mentioned we needed to look at within the budget is the health insurance. 2 years ago, and I'll come back to slide 16, but if you could go to the next slide. 2 years ago, in calendar year 19, we had a very bad year for claims. The first 3 years that we had the plan, we had built up some reserves, but last year, you can see here, we had a total budget of $8.2 million in premiums coming in through payroll that are county and employee contributions. Our net claims were $7.3 million, significantly higher than usual, and $1.5 million for our stop loss insurance and our administrative fees, bringing our fund balance down by $700,000. Also, if you recall, we did increase insurance as a result of that, but we had not been increasing health insurance much at all since we had started our own self-insurance. The first 3 years, I think maybe we had a 1 or 2% increase in 1 year. So we had gotten behind on building up our reserves, and we also have a reserve policy that the board adopted to try to get to 50% of our claims, meaning in this scenario, we would have wanted to have $3.5 to $4 million in reserves, and we don't. As a matter of fact, if we were to stop our self-insurance plan today and just premiums, we start paying another insurer, we go back to the state plan, and we stop being self-insured, and we pay all trailing claims, we would have to, we do not have enough funding in the fund to cover that. So that was 2019, calendar year 2019. Next slide, please. We needed to, so we did increase insurance premiums last year, but we also did a COLA last year. And this year, or, ending calendar year 20, we broke even. There you can see we had $8 million in total budget and accrued funding. We had claims of $6.5 million and total expenses of $1.4, leaving $9,500, skin of our teeth. And then the dental, actually dental did pretty well. So, and I say pretty well, dental's not the big, is not the big scare. Dental, for the first 4 years of dental, we lost money. We did increase dental a little, and it proved to, if Daniel, could you go back to slide 17? So if you can see, last year dental about broke even. We raised the dental rate, and we're where we should be on dental. We think that on dental, the reason we actually weren't closer to right on is because a lot of people didn't go to the dentist for several months because of COVID. They were closed. And so we think we will probably see more dental claims this calendar year as things have opened back up. But we think that our rate is pretty comparable to what those claims will be. So we feel pretty confident we don't need to touch dental, but we do think that we're going to need to do something about medical. Medical costs, just by nature, the industry, the price of medical services goes up an average of 10% per year. As I said during the study session, that's because technology, it advances. They have better and better ways to treat cancer, to treat different things, chronic illnesses, to deal with premature babies, you name it, but it's costly. And so the cost of service goes up. I debate this constantly with Gallagher and Company, our consultants, like, when in the world will we ever see health medical prices go down? But it's not a regulated industry, and so health insurance premiums will likely always increase. But we've tried through our wellness plan, and having also the fact that Santa Fe County is a fairly healthy workforce compared to when we were in the state pool. We actually showed to be, on the whole, a younger and healthier group of employees. So we've found, other than the last year or two, that the county has done pretty well with claims, but we have had more large claims. We used to have an average of about 6 to 7 claims a year that were over $75,000, but now that number in the last 2 years has doubled, and we've had about 13 to 14 claims per year that have been over 175,000. So if you could go back to 16 now, Daniel. So we asked so Gallagher, our consultant, provided us 3 proposals, and that is a 1% increase, a 2% increase, or a 3% increase to the employee-employer medical, and like I said, and dental. I didn't even bring the dental because, as you could see, I think that the dental is probably at the moment priced right, but with increase in medical prices and increased costs in healthcare, we are likely to fall behind on our healthcare. And that's just based on what's happened over the last 2 years. I could show you, we could go back to the, if the board wants, I don't have them with me now, but to the beginning of the plan. But we're still doing better than if we had stayed with the state plan. And we did build up some reserves in the first 3 years. They just took a pretty big hit in 19 and did not get built back up in 20. So the three plans, this shows you what the cost is for a 6-month period in FY 2022 for the employer and the employee. So I just wanted to show you that, but I'm going to take you through the breakdown as well as what do these mean, because I know every one of the commissioners has concerns when we increase our health insurance premiums and what effect that would have on an employee's take-home pay. So I just wanted to show you that's what the total costs are when you look at any one of these 3. Now, if we could go, Daniel, to slide, I think it would be right here, 19. So here's how the options are. I'll actually go from option 3 to option 1. Option 3 is if you did the 1% increase, what that shows is that we have no margin for error in our claim fluctuation. They give us a 2.5% claim fluctuation. So that says if our claims are exactly what they think at 7.77 million, we would have, and then we'd have our non-claim costs. That's the insurance, the stop loss insurance, the aggregate stop loss insurance, and our administrative fee. That'd be $9.1 million, but we would not have any wiggle room. Anything that didn't go well there, we would eat back into the reserves. Option 2 with a 2%. What that gives is a 2.5% margin for claim fluctuation, which is $194,000. And option 3 with a 3% increase would give us the 2.5% claim fluctuation of $194,000 plus the potential cash reserve build up of $194,000, about a third of what we lost in calendar year 2019. Next slide, please. And then this is how those break down. So if you look at the, this is the 3% illustration. And what you see across the top, it says employee contributions. We have 4 tiers. Our employees that make 30,000 or less, the county pays 80%, the employee pays 20%. In the next tier, which is 30 to 40 or 30 to 50, I think. I probably have the tier wrong. County pays 75%, employee pays 25%. The next tier is, I think, 50 to 70. County pays 70%, employee pays 30%. And over 70, the county pays 65%, and the employee pays 35%. And then this is what it is broken down. You can see so this is per pay period, what the premiums are. And then the very last, so the first white column, the white columns are what are taken out of the paycheck from the employee. The bottom half is how much the county pays. The green column is if you did a 3%, how much would come out of the employee's check, and then how much would the county have to pay. And then the blue column at the end is the total impact, but it's also broken down by employee percentage and by type of plan, whether they're HMO, just employee, HMO, employee plus spouse, HMO, employee plus family, and then PPO, the more expensive plan. And you can see on the more expensive, the most expensive plan on this one would be Presbyterian PPO, employee plus family, 20% paid by the employee. That would be $5.96 more per check, and that comes out to a pre-tax number of about $143 a year. But in aggregate, that's $77,600 in employee contributions in a full year, and $206,000 in county contributions, for a total increase of $284,000. Next slide, please. Exact same information, but that's with a 2% increase. That's $3.97. If I go to that far column in the blue, most expensive plan, lowest paid employee, employee plus family, $3.90 per check. But $189,000 to the county in total, $51,000 to employees in total. And then next slide. This is the 1%. So this is the one that does not give us any cushion for error in estimating our claims, nor any buildup in any reserves. And that would have us at $1.99 for the most expensive plan, employee plus family for somebody at 30,000 or less, and 94 or 68,000 for the county in total. Next slide. Because I know that this is of concern to the commissioners, I went and took an employee who's our lowest paid employee right now, would be $13 an hour. If you approve the 50-cent increase, the 2 increments of the 50-cent increase, they would get a 50-cent increase on July 1 and June 29th. The health insurance increase wouldn't go into place until January of 2022, but you can see that the most, so it shows you the monthly impact. If you're single HMO, $4, family HMO, $10, single PPO, $4, family PPO, $12. That's the monthly. But if they got both of those increases, they would be going up $160 in per month in take-home pay. Plus, if you approve the one-time payments, they would have a minimum of, I'm sorry, on this particular group, they would have a minimum of $1,200 and a maximum of $2,400. Sorry about that on that slide. Yvonne and I were messing with these, but it's actually in this particular category, they would have a minimum of $1,200 one time and a maximum of $2,400. Next slide. To somebody who's in the next tier, it's $14.42 an hour, and they would go up 50 cents. They would go up 50 cents on July 1 and 8 cents to the $15 an hour on June 29th. And so they would have an annual gross increase of $1,206 with a maximum insurance increase of $179. And they'd also have a one-time payment of a minimum of $1,200 and a maximum of $2,400. And you can see that the monthly impact. So their monthly impact is $2, $6, $3, or $7, depending on which plan they have, but they would have an $80 per month increase in pay. And then the next slide. Oh, I see what, I'm sorry. I see also what one-time payment not included. What Yvonne was putting is it's a minimum recurring of $1,000 a year and a maximum of $1,200 a year. But they'd also have the one-time payment. Sorry, I misread that bullet. The bullet's not wrong. It was, my brain was wrong as to what I was reading. That's showing you that with that 50 cents, they would have a minimum of $1,000, or depending on where they fit into the between $14 and $15, they would have a net maximum of $1,200. And then on this one, 2404, somebody's at 2404, which is the bottom of the next tier. This is where they would not, without a COLA, they would not receive, without a COLA, they wouldn't receive a one-time, they wouldn't receive a cost of living increase, but they would get a minimum of $1,000 or $1,200 or $2,400, depending on their time of service with us. So they would still have, and the maximum monthly increase they would have is $9, but they're going to have a minimum, no matter what, of $1,000. I think that one, yeah, because 2404 times 2080. Yeah, they're going to be in the $1,000 minimum, $2,400 maximum, one-time payment. So while they might have an annual insurance increase, a maximum of $215 because they have the PPO with family, they're still going to have a one-time payment without any COLAs that would cover that increase in the first year. So that is my explanation on the impact of any health insurance increase. Sorry. Next slide. So before I go on, maybe I should just ask, do you have any questions specifically about the any of those compensation or health insurance? Because my proposal on this is all of those together, is that we would do the lowest paid employees, the 50 cents, anybody who's under $15 an hour, 50 cents and 50 cents, or up to $15 if you are between 14 and $15, that you would move up to $15 minimum. And then also we would do the one-time payments. That one-time payment is close to $1.6 million. And then that also we would do a 3% increase on our health insurance premiums at the same time. And that we would do those regardless of the, federal money. Because I just don't have the guidelines on the federal money. But I do have proposals once we get the guidelines, and as long as I know it can be used for revenue replacement or essential public safety employee salaries, then I know that we could do COLAs as well.
So Commissioners,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Manager Miller.
I just wondered before I went on, because I know those are kind of complicated, if anybody had any questions about those.
So Commissioners, are there any questions?
Madam Chair, I have a couple of questions.
Commissioner Garcia?
I'm sorry, I must have the flu symptoms, but I'm just feeling a little bit under the weather, and because I heard it's going around. However, Catherine, thank you for letting us rewrite the plan, and thank you for what you do, because you are the smartest budgetary person since I met you 20 years ago in the entire state. Thank you for what you do. You're almost like my superintendent. Great individual. And one of the other things I have is just a couple of questions, because as the assessors, have we talked to the assessor in regards to what the I understand the GRT, but there's so much building happening in this community. The valuation is just going up and up and up. So that's a question I have. You don't have to answer it now. Thank you.
I can answer that. I would like to answer that since you asked it. So what's happened, I have talked to the assessor about, so we always do property taxes in arrears. So when you pay your property taxes this year, you're paying for last year's value. So of what it was valued at on April 1st of 2020 is what you pay in December of 2020 and May of 2021. So he finishes his valuation in the spring, and he just finished for this last round, and he told me, you are correct, we did really well in residential. However, non-residential went down. So we went down in non-residential by $200 million in value out of about 1.5 or 1.6 billion. And we went up, though, in non-residential about 400 million. The problem for us budgetarily with that is that non-residential pays at 11.85 mils per thousand of value, and residential pays at about half that, or 5.9 mils per thousand in value. So we won't see the benefit of that big increase in non-residential because we're going to have such a significant drop in our residential. In addition, when you have a big jump in value, there is a formula called yield control, and it's a factor that says if you have a big jump in values, then the rate goes down so that the government doesn't get a big windfall of money just because property values spiked. Plus, we have that 3% valuation cap. So there are things that limit the funding we get out of the big boom in the residential side. So, for instance, we know home prices have gone up, but and home values have gone up, but unless a home changes hands, they're still going to stay at the 3% cap. So I think we will see an increase in we'll see an increase in revenue on the residential side, but we're going to see a decrease on the non-residential side. Plus, we're not sure what the impact of people not paying is yet. I think we may know a little more in by the end of the fiscal year as to whether or not we had a lot of more delinquents of people who put off paying property tax and to pay other bills. But we still are a little concerned about that issue and how that's going to play out, and whether our current year collection rate will stay as high as it had been in previous years.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just really quick, sorry, I'm just a little bit under the weather. Appreciate you, Catherine. You know that you're the best in the state when it comes to the budget. Just in regards to the public safety GRT tax, I know a lot of that goes to the fire department. I'm just worried about our public safety department or the expansion and whether or not we can change that tax to instead of going to fire, go to public safety, and how they need to spend it for RECC, regional economic, the RECC. That's a question I have. And then the hiring freeze. What have we learned from the hiring freeze? Has it helped us, not helped us? That's a question I have. You don't have to answer now, but let's get a hiring freeze for whatever. And the other concern I have is in regards to, I would like to help other employees, as into putting money in from that, what you just talked about, for helping them out with their health insurance, health premiums, so on and so forth. I would really like to definitely help them out. And so those are some of the questions I have. But thank you, Catherine. Once again, a great job on the budget. You and your team do an excellent job, you know that. And, you know, Santa Fe County and all the employees are great. We're still working, but thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. As far as the hiring freeze, the reason we did the hiring freeze and then we lifted it was because we really didn't know how long this pandemic would go. And we knew that we were going to, and the governor shut the whole economy down, shut the whole state down, and shut it down twice during that time. And what I didn't want to do was what many other local governments did, and that was furlough people or cut pay, but more that we could weather the storm without losing anybody but by attrition. We also, the hiring freeze was not a 100% freeze. Public safety still continued, and essential positions still continued to hire. They just didn't hire to full capacity. So for instance, the sheriff's office kept a 10%, was kept to a 10% vacancy. similar to RECC. And corrections, they also rearranged their staffing in a way to not use as much overtime, which was really beneficial. It helped us save money and helped us also to be at a point where I knew we could go back to full capacity, full hiring capacity, and budget into next year at full capacity. As well as budget meet, I'd say 99% of department and elected officials' budget requests. Now, as far as the public safety funding, we passed ordinances on some of those GRTs, and then the law changed also. So I'm actually glad that Commissioner Garcia brought this up, because Commissioner Hansen had asked a question, did we still have the last hold harmless increment? Well, actually, last year they redid the maybe it was the 2019, I'm sorry, but 19 and 20 legislative sessions are blurred into one to me. But they did change the tax structure, and they took away the designations on some of the increments. However, we put them, many of our increments, except for the hold harmless, we put those in place by voter approval. So the 1/8 that helps fund the fire department, that one was done by voter referendum. Also, the fire 1/4 cent is done by referendum, and I think that needs to stay that way. And then the one that is split between fire and RECC was not done by referendum. Actually, no, it was not done by referendum. However, by law, it does have to be used for dispatch as well as EMS. But it has to be used for dispatch or a joint dispatch. So that one really can't change its purpose. And then we put a hold harmless increment in place, and we funded predominantly public safety with that. That was done by commission action, but it funded 18 firefighters as well as some other fire staff, about 4 or 5 people at the jail, funded 3 more deputies for the sheriff, and it funded our crisis triage center, which is going to be fully opening next fiscal year. So it's not done by statute, it was done by ordinance to fund those things. And so if the board wanted to change any of those designations, you could, but then you would have to look for how to fund those things. And then there's one other GRT that's very specific to public safety in, and that is in the corrections, and that one has to go to corrections. It goes to help fund staff as well as debt service on the jail. And then there's a 1/8 that is split between health and EMS, fire service. So those are our GRTs. That one I think was done by referendum and needs to stay. That last one is for health services as well as EMS services, and that one was done by referendum. However, we do still have some GRT capacity, but it's no longer called the third increment or third 1/8. I think we have like just slightly more than an 1/8 available. I think it's like 0.1675 or something like that. And what also changed with the law is that you don't have to do a 16th or an 1/8. You can do a 10th now. You don't have to do, I think you can go as low as a 10th. But I just wanted to bring that up. I'm not, none of the budget proposal we have in front of you is asking to change any of our designations of existing GRTs, nor to impose any additional GRTs. I do believe that the federal funding will help us bridge the gap between our reduced revenues right now and getting back to pre-pandemic numbers. So, Madam Chair, any other questions about those couple of things?
I don't know, do other commissioners have additional questions? I actually just wanted to confirm that all of the things you mentioned, including the one-time payments, you're proposing we take that out of the regular budget because we just don't know what's happening with the Recovery Act funds at this point.
So far, yes.
We talked about it. Okay.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner. So everything that I've mentioned so
Madam Chair.
far, I believe that we can fund with our existing funds and then also our fixed assets. And then I'll show you how. And then I will show you how I think we can fund compensation packages for the employees as soon as I get some guidance from the federal government.
Okay. Commissioner Garcia, do I hear your voice?
Madam Chair, I don't just thank you for letting me talk. Catherine, excellent job, and thank you for taking care of our employees in Santa Fe County. You know that, and so I just appreciate the hard work that you all do. But thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. So, okay, it looks like, Manager Miller, that we could proceed.
Okay, thank you. So then, as you know, and I've said it as we go through each budget presentation, how we fund our fixed asset replacement and our one-time requests. And that's by the fact that we do budget generously in salary and benefits by budgeting at 100% as opposed to like a 90% or something like that, which is what the state and many other governments do. But then we know that as if there are vacancies, that money will fall out of the budget. We will have some funding and we'll have money to then pay for vehicles, computers, hardware, peripherals, all our heavy equipment for solid waste, other equipment and machinery, software purchases. We always are needing to update our software, and then sheriff's vehicles and other county vehicles. So these are the requests that came in by type. It came to a total of 6.5 million. We're recommending, and this is just the general fund. So also all of those revenues that I've showed you are all funds combined, recurring and all one-time funds combined, but this is just general fund. So road equipment, for instance, we do a transfer to the road fund, but there's not enough revenue in the road fund from the state's gas tax to pay for much of anything. We usually transfer something like, you know, $5 to $6 million or more a year from the general fund. So when Public Works asks for equipment, that comes out of the general fund, even though we transfer the money into maybe the road fund or solid waste. Same with the sheriff. Sheriff has their own funds, but it's predominantly all supported by the general fund, which the two primary sources of general funds are property tax and gross receipts tax. And so we always split out requests, particularly for capital, based on what fund is going to pay for it, even if the ultimate source is the general fund. So out of all of our, these were our general fund requests. We got a total of 6.57 million, and we're not recommending 573,000 of that. What's not recommended are a few vehicles, and those vehicles are vehicles that are either not ready for replacement. So we have a vehicle committee, call it the VERB, It's the, Gary'd have to help me with the actual acronym, but it's like vehicle utilization and something. What is it?
Vehicle Utilization Review Board.
Yes, the verb, the Vehicle Utilization Review Board. So they meet, and it has people from the different departments, and they meet. And maybe, Gary, you could just give a little overview of what the committee did this year and what your recommendations were.
Yes, Manager Miller. Madam Chairperson, members of the commission, the verb met earlier last month, and we made recommendations based on the requests that had come in from each of the departments and divisions. And we weighed the need for new vehicles based on our mileage targets for replacement and the age of cars. And we came up with 9 recommendations this year. I will add 2 things. One is, in this year, we are purchasing a new electric vehicle that we've just ordered, is a Chevy Bolt. This next year, for the county assessor, we will be adding another electric vehicle, a Nissan Leaf. And then our next steps are on August 2nd, we will meet again as a committee with the express purpose of us establishing a fleet program with fleet procedures, because we believe in the county that there are several cars and vehicles that are underutilized. We want to take a look at those, establish the fleet, and then develop a long-term strategic plan of reducing the number of cars in fleet and then increasing the number of electric vehicles. And with that, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer those.
Are there any questions?
Madam
So-
Chair,
Yeah, Commissioner Hanson.
I just want to let you know how happy I am to hear that you're purchasing electric vehicles. Besides that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. So, Manager
Thank you,
Miller, I
Madam.
assume.
And that was specifically to let Commissioner Hanson know that they are purchasing electric vehicles and they're not letting them buy anything, just regular replacement vehicles without rigorous review. So while there are vehicles that are in the in that package that are not electric, what we have tried to do also is get hybrids where we can, but a lot of the heavy utility vehicles, those are the ones that are recommended, and we don't have a whole lot of options for those type of vehicles. The other item, and Daniel, maybe you could go to attachment 2 so that the board can see what was in that request. So this is the request that we had provided previously, but what we did is kind of sorted it. Sorry, it does say attachment 3 on the top, but that's because we can fix that. But the reason, for purposes of this presentation, we changed it this morning. Yvonne and I were moving things around. What's in yellow on here, and I do want the county clerk to speak to this. She didn't know I was going to do this to her, but she does have a request in here for an election notification enhancement system. We're not recommending this at the time because we think that we need to do some more research as to exactly what this is, because it doesn't exist at the moment. And so utilizing the general fund for kind of R&D work is a little challenging. So I think that we need to actually have a little more definitive idea of what this is. And also, potentially we can use federal funding for it. Madam Clerk, did you want to speak to the board about what this request is?
Okay. Sorry, I try to do 3 things at once. Madam Manager, what would you like me to, oh, so the Bureau of Elections, Election Notification Enhancement System. So this is something that we are looking at trying to pay with some of our grant, but essentially we heard from voters is that they want to have a better ability to track their ballots. So we have the ability to track ballots a little bit on the USPS side of things. But once we get to the county, the ballot goes into a black hole. And so what we would like to do is be able to allow voters to, once they drop their ballot into a drop box, they'll have a smart drop box that will check in that ballot and either send them a text or email acknowledging that we've received that ballot. And that every step of the process, we can feed that information back into Service, which is the Secretary of State's database, so that we will have much better ballot tracking so that voters can feel much more secure about where their ballot is in the qualification, adjudication, and tallying process. So we can do that with smart drop boxes and sort of internal machinery that will automatically qualify ballots. So,
and Madam Clerk, and this doesn't exist yet, and it's something you're hoping could be developed, correct?
yeah, so some of the things are actually just, so like for instance, a smart Dropbox, that technology probably already exists. I just have to put it into, I have to get a vendor to put it together into a one device, but the technology for it probably already exists. That's why I have a patent search out on it. And then the other thing that we are sort of in negotiations with the Secretary of State around changing election law to accommodate some of the more automation features I want to have in elections that would make elections a lot faster and a lot more where the data is having instant feedback to voters.
Okay, thank you. So Madam Chair, Commissioners, so the reason we're not recommending funding at this time is we just don't think we're ready for that yet. In addition, we're hoping we would be able to use grant funding, current grant funding that we have, to further refine what this would be, as well as potentially use grant funding out of the recovery or rescue plan funding. So, and could you just kind of scroll through this, Daniel, please? So what we did is we've separated by department, and then we've separated by fund, and we've also ranked it. And I believe, oh, and also what's in yellow in here is what is was not in here before. And what we mean by that is it was not specifically in the spreadsheets that you saw before because it was in different places in the budget, but we moved them all into this. So these are arranged by, department. The yellow is what was not in there before. Then they're also arranged by the funding source. And then we have that whether it was the notes, like where it says exempted by verb, it means that the verb did not recommend funding it. And then and so otherwise we're recommending funding on everything but those things exempted by the verb and the voting equipment when we know better what we would be looking at, whether that's hardware, software, what type of asset, and whether we could use grant funding for that. Okay, Daniel, could you go back to the previous slide? Okay, and now down to the next slide. So that's general fund. Oh, no, sorry. The presentation. There you go. And now slide 27. And then these are, this is other funds. So when I say other funds, it's anything that's not general fund. predominantly what's in here. Heavy equipment, other equipment and machinery is fire funds. So it's all the different funding that the fire department gets in quarter-cent excise tax or fire funds or other specific funds. Utilities is also in here. These are all non-general fund. And we did recommend all but 75,000 of those. And that less not recommended would have been a verb. I can blame it on Gary. Gary said no. Okay, next slide, please. So that brings us to this is no American Rescue Plan money, no ARP money, no Biden Care or whatever it's called, because it's been called everything under the sun, but no $29 million yet. I believe that based on our revenue estimates and based upon cash balances, that we would be able to do these things. So this is total estimated revenue of 144. This is recurring to a recurring. We're off by $74,000. But then add in the hourly increases for those earning less than $15. That's $295. Add in the 3% option for medical insurance premium increase. That's $103,000. And then no change to our dental insurance premium. And then we would need the one-time payment for employees of $1,562,000 plus the fixed assets general fund of almost $6 million, brings us to $152,864,000. Next slide, please. So you're asking, how do we pay that? Well, we would pay, as we said, we believe we will have at least $5 million come out of the budget, or actually $10 million, including the CARES Act funding that we got, that we used for public safety salaries. So we'll have about $10 million fall out of the budget in our general fund. There'll be other money that falls out of the budget, but that's general fund. And that we would pay for the one-time payments to employees of $1.5 million and fixed assets of $6 million or $7.5 million, which gives us a little bit of wiggle room of $2.5 million. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to the board about with that, and I just don't have the exact, I'm still waiting for the guidelines also on the federal money, but we have that $2 million year out proposal for the energy savings. I had thought we could do one of a couple of different things. We could either just pay cash for it, or we could finance $1 million of it and pay cash for $1 million of it out of here. Oh, and we would finance through the New Mexico Finance Authority, and the financing would be below, the payments would be small and below what the savings would be. And then, or we could potentially use some of the funds from the, rescue plan and just pay cash, and then the savings goes to our bottom line immediately. So I bring that up here because it's one thing that's not in the budget, but I had, when they presented at the BCC a couple of meetings ago, this is where I was hoping we would be able to just pay for it outright, either using any kind of federal relief funding that we might get, or using savings out of this year's budget. Next slide, please. Then on the recurring side, recurring to recurring, we had the $74,000 deficit, the $295,000 or close to $300,000 for those earning less than $15. an hour. That's a recurring expenditure. And then the 3% for medical totals about $473,000. In the budget, which I did not point out the last time because I wasn't 100% sure whether it was on the capital side or on the recurring side, we actually have $500,000 for broadband. But I also believe we'll be able to use money, and that would be every year that we would have that 500,000 if it's used on the recurring side. That's where it's sitting right now. I would recommend just taking that down to 450. Then out of those other areas, training and travel, per diem, light heavy duty vehicle maintenance, supplies, and other operating costs, these amounts, when we were going through our budget hearings, these were areas across the county in every in the bigger departments, predominantly in public safety and public works, not the smaller offices. These were areas we said, well, we probably have some wiggle room. So we can come up with, by cutting in those areas across those divisions and departments, about $473,000. And right there, you have a budget. You have a balanced operating budget. You do have a compensation package for the lowest paid. You do have a one-time compensation package for everybody. And you have funding for many of the priorities in the strategic plan at some level that we went through when we broke out everybody's department budgets. Next slide. So that would be my recommendation to the board at this point, not knowing about the American Rescue Plan. But we know that the American Rescue Plan passed. We know that direct county allocations were made to the tune of $65.1 billion based on population, and that every county is eligible for a direct allocation, that we'll get our allocations in 2 tranches, 50% within 60 days, which, by the way, 60 days, I think, is May 10th. Like I said at the beginning, we'll get the money before we ever know the rules. And they're good for, the funds can be used much longer than the CARES Act, which is nice, through December 31st, 2024. And they will come to us directly. And then the U.S. Treasury is working on the guidance. There is an attachment 3 to this presentation as well. Daniel, if you could go to that real quickly. One of the requests of the board, I know that Commissioner Garcia asked for a graph of what's in that bill. Best we can tell, this is what's in that bill, in the American Rescue Plan and the different places to go get it. So we've made a chart, and it was the stuff that we had just listed out, but we put that in chart form so that you all would have a copy of what we have been able to garner is in the rescue plan in the different types of funding that will be available. These 2 do not have guidelines yet. So many of these are not out and available yet, but these are the type of funds that in that rescue plan, as well as New Mexico assistance programs. So we put American Rescue and New Mexico assistance, and we put that, how many pages is this, Daniel? I don't know if you can just, it's 3 pages of this, so that you would have this as a readily available resource for you and your liaisons and your constituents. If somebody asks, where do I go to get help with my P&M bill? Here's where you send it. I send them. Or where do I go to get assistance for PPP? We put the SBA site and how much is available in these different programs. So any information we could find, we put it into this chart for you. We will continue to do that as things get updated. We will update this chart for your reference and our and the county's reference. Okay, thank you, Daniel. So next slide. So what's Santa Fe County's distribution going to be? We've been told it's $29.1 million, and that we would receive our first distribution this fiscal year in 10 days. We're ready to give them the information to deposit it into an account, into a specific fund. We have our DUNS number, our vendor number. We're ready to go. And then the other half, no sooner than 12 months, which we estimate will be more like early fiscal year 2023, July, August timeframe of 2023. I think that depends on, I don't know, they didn't tell us what determines when you get your second allocation. So that's another thing we have to figure out as well. The allowable uses that we can find as written in the Act are to respond to the public health emergency, assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. So we could probably beef up our marketing. Providing grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers who perform essential work. That would be us. We have essential workers. So I believe that we can do that, as well as provide grants to entities. Worker premium pay. So that to me would indicate that we could pay employees more. Public safety salaries and benefits, like we did with the CARES Act money, where we got that $5 million when we pushed as much out the door we could, but where we couldn't, we used it for public safety salaries. And then reduction in revenue. So this is the one we just aren't sure how that's going to work, but I'm hoping, as you'll see when I get to the next slides, that's a big one I'm counting on. And then make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. Restrictions. These are specific restrictions in the Act. Pension contributions and lobby activities not allowable. County should be careful around capital infrastructure improvements. So I'd like to be able to make recommendations to you, but I don't know what. Like, I don't even know when they say broadband. They had a webinar, as a matter of fact, a week or two ago, and they said, and don't do broadband, even though we say broadband, but don't do it because there's millions over here for broadband, and use it. So I'm really looking forward to getting some more information. And then anything, questionable items, we don't want to do anything that might cause repayment to the U.S. Treasury. Next slide. So for us, as I was trying to show you in the, what we had kind of hoped is we could say, well, a portion of those funds could be used for projected revenue loss. And that we could hold some of those funds in our recurring revenues. I'm not worried about the one time, but our recurring revenues, because I need a recurring source to provide compensation packages and increases in staffing. And so here's our major revenue sources. And I say general fund. General fund is what we use to basically cover everything except utilities. And some of the grant programs. But utilities is our only enterprise fund, and they generate their revenues through fees, and that's how they cover their expenditures. But everything else pretty much falls right back on GRT or our general fund property tax. So here's where we have from 20, which was our high year. And the reason 20 was high, even though the pandemic hit in 20, we were on a record year in revenues in 20 for GRT. We were up like 7%, and then we dropped by 25%, 30%, I think was one of our worst months. So, but the first part of the year did carry us through. But if I just looked at from 20 being our high year in property tax, our high year in GRT, our high year in investment income, our high wasn't our high year in care of prisoners, but you can see we're still concerned about our numbers, because in 21, our care of prisoners money is down significantly from 20. And then our hold harmless distributions. That number mystifies me because it shouldn't bounce around like that. People eat groceries. I don't understand. So, but anyway, it's down. And so when we project like that, we're looking at and that number will continue to go down, by the way. Hold harmless distributions are going away at 7% per year statutorily. So the state has a phase out of those. And they were scheduled to go out over a 15-year period at 7% for 10 years and 6% for 5 years. So that revenue will ultimately go away completely for us. So I don't even like to consider it a recurring revenue, because it is a declining recurring revenue. But if you just took those major revenue sources, that 6.6 million in revenue loss, and the recovery plan says that you can use it for revenue recovery, and it also says you could use it for public safety salaries and benefits, which are supported by property taxes and gross receipts. Most of ours are. So one of the things, my thought process is, if we set aside 6 million per year over those 3 fiscal years for revenue recovery, if our revenues come back before that, great. Then we can shift, we can shift and spend those funds for other allowable uses. But if we're going to provide compensation for employees, we need to know that money is going to be there for the future years. So this is a conservative approach to planning for a slow recovery. And that would be by setting aside some of that rescue plan money. Frankly, if by next year, if by the end of fiscal year 2022, you didn't need to set that much aside, only enough to cover the increase for the following year, then allocate it to something else. But going into it, thinking from the perspective of, well, at least in the first fiscal year, we need to set aside funding to cover these proposed cost of living increases is a good approach, and you'd want to make sure you could cover them into the next year or two. So next slide, please. So then that's where we get to these potential costs. When we talked the last time, we looked at cost of living increases of anywhere from 1% to 2%. So this would just give you, if you had a cost of living increase effective of 2% on January 1st, 2022, that'd be $675,000 for the half of the year. And then if you did another one in 2023, remember you have a full year of the first 2% plus a half of year of the next 2%. And then you're going to have in the third year a total of the first 2% and the second 2% for a whole year. So this is our way that we phase these in. But then also we have to look at $295,000 to complete that hourly increase for those individuals under $15. And we have FTE requests, and we had the full implementation, because I had said that the medical insurance premium increase is only for 6 months, because it doesn't come into play till January of 2022. A full year of an increase is $206,000. So you're looking at about $6 million on a recurring basis for those things. Next slide, please. So this is just a recap what it costs. If you did a 1.5 and a 1.5, that's a total recurring of 2 million, total annual recurring of 2 million. A 1.5 and a 2 is a total recurring of 2.4 million. And a 2 and 2 is a total recurring annual cost of 2.7 million. Next slide. If you want to see that, these were just additional slides to give you an idea. If we broke it down by bargaining unit, and like I said, you see the full effect doesn't come in right away, but that's 1.5 and a 1.5. That's how the 2 million, how we arrive at the 2 million per year going forward. And then that's what those dollar amounts are broken down by union. Once again, just a reminder that even though we might say a 2% increase, the unions may allocate it, the bargaining units may allocate it differently through negotiations. Next slide, please. This is the cost of the 1.5 and the 2% broken out by fiscal year and by bargaining unit, which totals about $2.4 million on a recurring basis when it gets fully implemented. And the next one. And this is 2% and 2% at 2.7 million. Next slide. So, and then we had all of our FTE requests. Because I haven't gotten the guidance, I haven't done a lot of analysis on all of these, particularly in the public safety area. Although there are certain ones I would definitely recommend, even without the rescue funds. Next slide. So here's a breakdown of those positions. There was a project manager in IT, youth services, administrative program manager. Now in this one, the reason I put this in purple is I do believe that with very little money, not $36 an hour plus benefits, we would actually be able to do this with existing positions. And I'm working with Rachel and HR to make that happen. So we think that we're going to be able to create this position within our existing budget request. So that one's in purple because I would like to, in the interim budget, request approval of that. There'd be more when I know what the federal funding rules are, but that one for sure, because I don't think that there will be a need to come up with any additional funds with that. Also down in road maintenance, the 3 heavy equipment operator positions. If you notice, we changed these to term positions, and what we would do is this is a road construction crew, and we would utilize them, and we'd utilize funding from, oh, and also, I'm sorry, and also the surveyor tech position. I forgot to turn that one purple. But those 4, that would be road construction crew. But what we would use is capital, the capital funds that we have for roads, which are predominantly the general obligation funds. We would use those funds in order to buy all the supplies and pay for all the staffing. They have to be very careful that they only work on those projects which they are funded with, but we think that we can do that. And then when they need to work on anything else using road general fund, we would use any vacant positions to cover that. Then also solid waste, we believe that we have enough funding in the solid waste program. These are currently 2 part-time temp employees that they would like to turn to 2 permanent full-time employees, so that we can properly staff the transfer stations. And then in utilities, these are 3 employees that would be paid for out of utilities revenues. And this is when we bring the renovated sewer treatment plant, at the quill plant up, and they need those staff in order to operate that new facility. So the ones in purple, in addition to the survey tech surveyor, we would recommend those being approved. When we find out about whether we can do what we said with the rescue plan money, we would also recommend the sheriff deputy 1 position. This is a position that the sheriff already had, but he needed to convert that position for his IPRA requests because he was inundated with them. And it would just be bringing that, funding that position again. And also, we would recommend the growth management positions. And we would entertain a lengthy discussion about the fire positions and those requests, because the 12 fire cadets was not an original request within the fire department's budget. And reason I added that was, it was, how do you build in a relief factor as opposed to everybody being on overtime anytime someone calls in sick, on sick leave for a shift or training or annual leave, that we would need to actually build staffing levels differently with a relief factor. But I think that that's something that would require much greater discussion with the board. In addition, there may be other priorities that the board thinks that we need before we would fund all of these positions within the fire department. In addition, I know that the board had expressed an interest to me in elevating the community development role in the county. It's currently a division within growth management, but in discussions at the housing authority, as well as discussions in strategic planning, much of the focus was, how do we get increased focus on the economic development, housing development, etc. So I would also want to bring forward a proposal to meet that request as well. And what my thought is that I would do that if I can't believe that we would not have some federal guidelines within the next few weeks. But what I would request is that if I don't have federal guidelines before we do the interim budget approval, that we do everything that was above the line before I got to the rescue plan description, that we do that, and that we do these positions that are in purple, including the survey tech surveyor, and that we when we get the guidelines on the federal funding, then we look at the other FTE requests, as well as the thoughts about community development and the COLAs. And I do believe we will get those. And then in addition, any other things that the board would like us to consider relative to staffing or relative to uses of the federal dollars. Next slide, please. Oh, and then this last piece is there were some pieces of legislation that we know will have some impact directly on Santa Fe County, but there's not enough information at the moment to know exactly what those rules might be. One is per diem and mileage act changes. The DFA will have to go through rulemaking for that one. We do know that certain overtime pay as salary and para, that's in the, for firefighters, they have certain built-in overtime in their schedules, but it does not qualify for retirement contributions. That law changed so that it will. So we need to build that into our union negotiations as well as the budget. The restaurant gross receipts tax, restaurants are giving like a 4-month, are given a 4-month hiatus on submitting their GRT. But that one, I think we will be fine because they did do a $300,000 appropriation with that bill that is supposed to make all of the local governments harmless, that we would still get what would have been receipted by us in GRT from restaurants. And then obviously the Civil Rights Act. I don't know that we'll see anything huge right away, but we could see in our our insurance from New Mexico counties is through December 31st. So we may see a impact in our insurance premiums at mid-year from that. We just don't know what that might be. If the reinsurer decides to pull out, then the whole insurance pool may change. So those are the ones that I think could have some specific budgetary impact this fiscal year that I just don't have enough information on yet. And then next slide, please. So next steps. Next steps would be right now to hear from the board if there's anything in the budget as presented that you would like us to focus on, bring forward in the next session. We're proposing, we were originally going to try to do interim budget approval on May 11th, and we had held May 18th as a possible special session. Everybody had said that that date was available, but because we don't have the guidelines yet, we're kind of hoping to push another week and then come back in another, in a special board meeting for approval of the interim budget to include the rollover of our capital projects. So we don't have any new ones except what was in the 20 million of bonds, but we need to build the budgets for those, as well as every project that we currently have underway or have budget for. We need to roll that into the budget, and we'd like to present that to the board, so that I think that we could get all of that done on May 18th and hopefully have the guidelines so that we could then look at those other few recommendations. And then do a final budget by the end of June. And with that, I am through presenting and stand for questions.
So are there commissioners that have questions at this juncture? Commissioner Hanson and then Commissioner Hughes.
Thank you, Manager Miller, Madam Chair. Where are, I did not see where SWAMA might be, where we would increase that, where that increase might happen and how that would be in the budget.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson, on that one, we added another $120,000 into the budget before we had presented the last time. I'm still, and I am, I'm still not sure I agree with Randall's numbers the other day, and I did have a slide I was going to put in. I can tell you this, I believe that even with Randall's number, over a 5-year period from 22 to 26, those increases will be a cumulative $1 million increase to us. But Randall said, and this doesn't, and it doesn't jive with when we run the numbers. He said it would be about $120,000 with option 1, but then he said it would be almost nothing with the $10 decrease in the processing fee, and then it was to the good with a $25 decrease. And that's not, when we run the numbers, that's not how it comes out. So it's true that the $25 processing reduction in the processing fee is less, is the best option for us by running the numbers. But I don't come up with the number he comes up with, which was that it would be cheaper than what we're currently paying. We still come up with an increase no matter which option you use. So I wanted to work with Public Works and make sure that we've got the right tonnages in each category with what Randall has, what we have. And then next week when I have individual meetings, show you with the members who are on SWAMA, show you what I think. But we did build in the, I believe PJ Griego added into the system an additional 120,000 in tipping fees. Is that correct, PJ?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Manager Miller, yes, that's correct.
So we do, and that's what Randall projected based on his numbers and his consultant projected. We're clearly calling certain things, you know, different numbers on our tonnages, but so we do have that in no matter what. And the largest number and that was our most expensive scenario. That's if you did if the SWAMA board approved the $150 processing fee and the $42.50 for the increase.
And Manager Miller,
The big increase too, by the way, will come the following year because it's a $5 jump for refuse. He didn't go $42.50, $45, $47.50. He goes $42.50 to $47.50. Gary, what was that? I'm sorry.
Manager Miller, chairperson and commission members, I wanted to also add that we are setting up a meeting with Randall and with Mr. Yankee next Monday or Tuesday so that we can reconcile our differences with them and figure out how they're calculating tonnages differently so that we can give an answer that lines up with their rate designs.
I'm wondering off and on,
So,
just kind of sure that
we've already had that
everyone's still
conversation.
here.
We're sitting at that meeting now.
Okay, thank you.
Should have the new scenarios by mid next week.
So, Madam Chair, Public Works staff, Gary, Catherine, thank you for working on that because I don't see how we're going to get out of not raising those fees, and I want to make sure that they're in the budget. Then I do like the idea of paying off the energy ESCO. I think that at least do $1 million. I think it's to our advantage to do something like that. I don't know where, I think we need to start thinking about more money for outdoor recreation development, and maybe there'll be some money in the recovery plan and the guidelines. But I think there needs to be some development in that, especially with outdoor recreation and what has happened in the last year and what is with the new department at the state and how that's going to impact us. The other issue that seems to keep coming up, and I don't know how Public Works or solid waste or any of us are going to deal with this, but the litter and cleanup of the litter is a huge problem throughout the county. And the off ramps, and Commissioner Hamilton, you won't be happy to hear this, but 279 off ramp was brought up at the MPO as like a place that was getting just a tremendous amount of dumping litter and refuge. And so, you know,
That's not
I
me.
know they all play together, you know, and they all, you know, SWAMA, the fees going up, more littering on the road, you know, it's, I think it's a serious thing that we have to address, that is not something that was completely on the radar before. I was wondering about a hydrologist, if John was still looking for that in utilities. Anyhow, that's just a few of the short notes I have right at the moment off the top of my mind, but I just wanted to bring that up. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner Hughes?
Thank you. I was just wondering if when we finally do get the rules for the American Rescue Plan money, let's say we find that one of the uses we had for it isn't allowed, can we at that point switch things around and pay for the unallowed things out of our own money and put something else in there?
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Hughes, that's exactly what I was thinking, where I said, you know, they indicated we can use it for those things similar to the CARES Act, which one of them was public safety salaries. And so what we did when we had some funding left is we got reimbursed by using our public safety salary costs that we already had. And then that's what then left us some money to be able to do that one-time payment, because I had already budgeted for those public safety salaries. And then we ended up getting to bill for those public safety salaries, freeing up the budget that we had. So that's the budget that I'm saying, okay, now we can use that to give the one-time payments for salaries to the employees. And so I think we could do that. They haven't said. And so it's so hard. But that was one of the ways. Plus also care, assistance care, that's another area where, like behavioral health, we could potentially bill for our crisis center and then free up the money that we had dedicated to use for the crisis center for something else. That might be, depending on how the rules come down, that might be how we would have to do it. So that's what I was hoping to be able to tell you. Hey, we would bill for this and this, and then what we'd normally budget for that, we could budget over here. So that was, I'd hoped for some guidelines so I could give you more information along that line. But I do anticipate that that will be possible.
Okay, good. Just wanted to make sure we would at least probably have that flexibility, because I think some of the stuff we have proposed for that 14 million is important, and we want to make sure we can do it.
Yeah, so I do think that we'll have, if not, I don't know why they gave it to us.
Right. Right. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Commissioner Hanson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Some of the other things that I was thinking about, and I don't know where this would fall into, is possibly a deputy at growth management. Yeah, I think that there is going to be some ordinance changes that we're going to have to deal with. And so that was something that I didn't see on the FTE list, and something that I have thought about as a way to help our growth management be able to make changes in the ordinances and move that along.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Is Commissioner Garcia still on? I don't know if you have questions.
Yes, I am, Commissioner. Give me a minute, please. Yes.
I don't know if you had any questions.
Commissioner Hanson, in regard, well, all the commissioners, obviously, behavioral health, because we need that for the community. Public Works, some of the questions I have is regarding the actually chip seal to roads and stuff. What's to actually redo the roads? And because several roads in my district are actually falling apart, and I don't want to have it an emergency basis as to if there's budget there and there's money there, great, let's go get it done. But what's the larger plan? I know we have new project managers, but I just want to know what we have budgeted to upgrade the road. What's the actual plan? Also, for the temporary positions, I understand the temporary positions, but are these new positions that are they're going to work for a year, 2 years, and once the temporary gone, they're done, they're out of there? Regarding the hydrologist, I definitely agree with the hydrologist position, but something that's definitely been needed for a while. And one of the other thing is the public safety salaries. I just have a question that we could meet with that a little bit later, Catherine, that stuff, and then the river cleanup. I need to see what we need to do with the entire river and clean up and project manager, so on and so forth. So that's what I have, Madam Chair. Thank you, Manager Miller.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. So I actually agree with several of the comments made, including paying off at least some of the year-out energy expenditures. That sounded like a really good idea. At one point, when we were talking about possible uses of the recovery money, it was for needed infrastructure that included water and sewer as well as broadband. And the comment was made that there's another pot of money for broadband. But there are several water and some sewer, but especially some water projects, particularly for rural areas. You know, I have lots of examples that I've been trying to work on some strategic planning for water supply options for the more rural areas. And I think this is a potential good opportunity for that. So I don't want that to get lost out of the possibilities. Are there other questions at this point?
Madam Chair, I have a couple of thoughts here.
Okay, go
If I
ahead.
may. Just really quick, I know there's federal money out there, that there's tons of federal money out there, but I just want to caution us and my fellow commissioners that we can go apply for a lot of money, but I just want to make sure when we do go apply for federal money, because I know, you know, commissioners, that when you go to federal money, it's hard to administer the money. And if we could go apply for all the money in the world, but if we don't have project managers, then let's just plan that out. So
Yes.
So if you can just keep that in back of your head. Thank you.
Thank you. So Manager Miller, is this the point at which we would go on to the strategic planning, or did you have some wrap-up comments or another component of budget summary?
No, what I guess I would just ask is if the board is okay with us doing the special session on the 18th, to complete the interim budget. In that meeting, we would go over, hopefully have something more definitive on the rescue plan funding, and we would also include the carryover for capital projects and the budget for the new capital projects in the GO bond, so that we could request approval of the interim budget on the 18th, including all of that.
So you're asking for availability during the day on the 18th?
Correct.
I am not available from 8 to 10. I have an EPA conference call, but I'm available anytime after 10 a.m. Commissioner Hanson?
I am available from 10 to 3.
Thank you. Commissioner Hughes?
Yeah, I'm available after 10 o'clock on the 18th. Anytime.
Commissioner Garcia? Oh, sorry.
I was
Commissioner
just saying
Garcia?
anytime.
Anytime? Great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Garcia?
I'm available as well. But just one thing on the public safety salaries, I would like to know what the sheriff's position is on that, if he has any thoughts on that or any opinions, but I would like to know what he's thinking about that, if he's available. But I'm available on that date. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we can, if that's going to be discussed at a later time, maybe we can, Manager Miller, because we still have the whole strategic plan.
Exactly sure. If he's referring to the entire deputies, and I'm fine if the sheriff has some has anything he would like to add relative to public safety salaries in the sheriff's department.
Sheriff Mendoza, are you?
I'm here, and I'm sorry, I had somebody in my office and I was dealing with an issue. Can you repeat the question? I guess I missed that part.
Madam Chair, Sheriff, Commissioner Garcia asked if you had any comments or requests relative to salaries for public safety officers. I'm deputies or otherwise.
Madam Chair and Commissioners and Manager, I don't really have any concerns right now with the salaries. I did see in the presentation that there was an ability for essential workers premium pay, and I guess my question is what is that, and is that a viable option, and would that pertain to the officers and staff that have never gone home here, that we've been working since day one over this pandemic. But I guess I would just kind of put that out there, but I don't have anything specific in reference to salaries and things for the sheriff's office and deputies right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
We'll
you,
look into make sure when we get the guidelines what that is in reference to, and we can also look how that was viewed in the CARES Act. There might be some guidance there.
Excellent. Thank you, Manager Miller. So it sounds like if you have sufficient feedback on that, Manager Miller, we could move on to 2A, back to 2A, the strategic planning updates.
Okay.
Well, I wonder, could we set a time on the 18th? Because I may.
10 to 1. Does 10 to 1 work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry. I didn't realize my video was off and I was giving you a thumbs up.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioners, what we did from the 2 days that we did the group sessions is we took everything that was in what's in your and make sure I don't make a liar out of myself yet. what we did is in the strategic planning, so we took the plan, objectives and strategies, we took out the actions for purposes of just making easier document to read. And in the packet here, we have the original strategic plan, and then we, with everything, you know, the full works that the board has seen before. And then we had the condensed version that we used in the 2-day session. And then what we did is we took all the comments. We took all the comments from the groups, as well as the facilitators analysis, and we put all this into one document. This is just for your information. This is not to adopt anything. This is just a compilation of all of the discussions that occurred during that time. So as you can see, there's kind of a fairly good consensus. I think that many of the strategies or objectives, maybe not the objective itself, but some of the specific strategies, if they've been completed, then there's this idea, well, maybe we don't need this anymore, or we need to enhance the objective, you know, maybe expand on the objective. So where we have enhanced fire protection programs, well, we created the year-round wildland program. We created a hazard mitigation strategy and program. So they're like, okay, well, we don't need that anymore. Well, maybe it's not get rid of it, but maybe it's working with the fire department to say, okay, well, what's next? What would be next in this area? What would be some proposed, a proposed revision to this objective? Or what additional strategies do we need in order to expand or enhance our fire protection services? And so now what we'd like to do is we'd like to go back with this document, and I just wanted to give you kind of the, here's what came out of those. And while I understand that it maybe didn't provide that day what the board had hoped for in a rewritten strategic plan, what it did is really get everybody talking about it again and talking about what should this look like. First of all, I want the board to know that we took Eric Obo's position that he had before he retired, and we rewrote that job description so that that individual who's hired, and we're in the process of doing interviews for that position, but that position will be where the strategic plan resides. So it has a home, and that home is within the manager's office to really, really work on making this plan a more active and complete document, and updated regularly and presented to the board regularly. When we did it before, we didn't really have a person that had it as part of their position. It just happened that the finance director says, well, hey, I'll write this up. And so that was when Stephanie Chardon-Clark was here, and so she kind of created it, and then she left, and then I think Gary inherited it, and so then at that time Gary and Erica worked on keeping it updated, and then Gary went over to Public Works, and then Erica left. Then Joey was working on it, but she was trying to learn her job as budget director. So what came out of all that is that I think we really need it to be somebody's job, part of their job. So in order for it to be managed properly. So that's one thing. So when that position gets filled, which I hope to do very soon, their job will be to then take anything where it really looks like there was a fairly good consensus to remove something, remove it, but not make it disappear, but create an appendix of accomplishments so that the strategic plan has an appendix of all the things that we've done, and it keeps it a list going, so that as this thing rolls and picks up more years and we finish things, those finished things don't just disappear, they become part of a backup document to, well, where were we and where have we come? What did we complete? What did we finish? And then if we remove something completely, not because we finished it, but because it just didn't make sense, that maybe goes into another area of lessons learned, things that didn't quite work out. So there's a document that keeps the history of what we tried to do that was successful and what we tried to do that maybe wasn't. Additionally, and maybe you could just go down a little bit, Daniel. So you see a lot of these, many.
Also, Madam Chair, Daniel, can you blow it up a little more, please, if you can? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Catherine.
Mr. Chair.
Is that better?
Yeah, Commissioner Garcia, does this work?
Yes, that's better. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Manager Miller.
Okay, thanks. So the other thing would be to, like where it's pretty much consensus, says retain, and none of the groups or anybody had any issue, those would probably stay the same. Things that we were thinking of removing because we finished it, we would put that to an appendix of finished. If we were thinking of removing it because of it's not really a strategy. So study fire department organizational structure wasn't so much a strategy, but it's something that needs to be done, but maybe that's a that needs to be refined a little bit different. And that would be to say, hey, where we're missing something, what would it take to get to doing that? Plus, I'd like to work with the new fire chief with some additional objectives and strategies with some of her input, because she wasn't part of putting this together, and neither was Chief Litzenberg. But I know that there's probably a lot more information that they could add, that the fire department could add to the plan. So one, I want to get it so that I have one person who is responsible for helping us rework this. And then wherever we have, if you could scroll up some more, where we have things like, where we have maybe some new ones. Those are the ones that were thrown in there, and they're in blue. And where it says, you know, maybe revise it and reword it and combine it. So for instance, we had the thought on I think there were some comments relative to the shooting range issue, about that also really is an outdoor recreational opportunity. And how do we, it's not just a public safety issue, it's also a sustainability issue in the litter, as Commissioner Hansen said. I think litter is a huge problem, not just in Santa Fe County. I was reading clips from other counties. They're having just terrible, news clips, just terrible time with litter right now. But that we would come back to the board in another session, but hopefully this session would be in person, because we're getting to a point where we can be in person, where we come back with some recommendations on where it says revision, like revise it, reword it, whatever, that we actually have some recommendations to the board on how we might add some of those new objectives and how we might word some of those, and have some very specific strategies on how we would accomplish those objectives. So this was really just, the update was to show you all the format with everything, with all the comments from the group meetings. We would not, and the facilitator. We won't leave it like this, but this was just so you had all the information from all the groups, since we didn't have a lot of time to talk as a big group. So these are there for you. We will print, make sure you get a printed copy of this, along with what the original strategic plan looked like. And then we thought after we get the budget, interim budget done, then we would also plan another strategic planning session, but in person, and where we could go through ideas that came out of these sessions and some actual suggested objectives and strategies under those.
So are there questions? I certainly have at least one, or comments.
Madam Chair, I have some questions, if I may. Thank you, Manager Miller. Thank you for the staff for actually moving forward on this stuff. Is regarding, I know we're in the budget session, but what is
Commissioner Garcia, did we lose you? Commissioner Garcia, you may have become muted.
Sorry about that. I would just like to know what is the cost of all this plan? The rough cost for everything that's going on here, because we need to look at the cost for that stuff. The planning is great. However, thank you for Catherine and you and your staff, but what does some of the stuff cost? Because we need to know that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Garcia, I think that's a really good point. That what the other thing that we want to do is, we're not saying all of these things are just automatically added, because I don't think that we can do it like that. I think we have to go through and do it by steps. We're going to need phases and steps to decide and some analysis of, well, what does this mean? So if I were to just say implement the initiatives and goals from federal, state, and partners on climate programs, I don't know what all of those initiatives and goals are. And that's a really broad strategy. So that's a strategy where I think I understand what the idea of it is, but it's not a definable, it's not something definitive that I could say, oh, well, we can do that, because I don't know what. So I'd want to make this more specific. Maybe there's because then you go to the next one, there's actually some, oh, no, not next page, just the next strategy underneath that, where we talk about the race to zero, or the Soul Smart, or Biden's climate plan. But that's a lot of things, and I agree with Commissioner Garcia. Just that one thing alone, what does that mean? That's huge, but it doesn't mean there aren't things within those race to zero, Soul Smart steps that we'd say, okay, we want to do this in year 1, this in year 2, this in year 3, that helps us get closer to net zero. So that's the kind of stuff where we need to go do some work to take those ideas, but that's going to take time, and that's going to take time with the staff to go, okay, under these, under some of these, can we be more specific of what it is we're going to actually do? Because we can't do everything. It's clear we can't do everything, and so we need to be more So some of the strategies need to be refined to be more specific and more actionable. And that's what we need to do. I think we have a good understanding of what where the board's trying to go, but we need to go do some work to come back with some ideas, vet those to the board, have you vote on whether those are what you want us to do or whether we missed the mark, and then come back again. I think this is going to take a few sessions to get to where I think what the board would like to see.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, in regards to just some of the stuff that I said, like there's some new FTEs for fire. I think those ones are pretty identical, but we can identify how much it's actually going to cost for 2 or 3 FTEs for fire. I know we can't give a recommendation for all of these projects, but there's a couple on them that we could. But I just want to know more or less what they're going to cost. But thank you, Manager Miller.
Thank you. Commissioner Hughes, did I see your hand up?
No.
Oh, okay, great. Commissioner Hanson, did you have anything at this point?
So I understand, delineating the issues in especially something like this race to zero, Soul Smart, those that really belong in separate categories. And, there's information that other commissioners might not have about the fact that the IGLEI and the Race to Zero, this organization, IGLEI, is willing to help Santa Fe County and provide us resources because we joined the Race to Zero that we didn't have before by doing that. And then with Soul Smart, I'm just giving you a little explanation. Soul Smart is a 1-year it lasts for 1 more year. It's a federal government program. We got the bronze. Do we want to get the silver or the gold? It's not a heavy lift, but they probably do need to be separated out as, strategies under, doing the climate plan or, anyhow, I don't need to get that specific right now, but, so that we can all understand what each one really entails, because some things might be small and some things might be large, that take a lot more bandwidth than other things, even, outdoor recreation. That's a huge comment, but, then breaking it down and how do we negotiate that and what can we do is, part of the strategies to deal with that. So I think it's helpful to have this document, and I was on a NACO Resilience County meeting right before this meeting, and they were talking about strategic plans and how important they are for counties. And, I have had the ability to be able to say, yes, Santa Fe County is working on a strategic plan, and we have been for the last number of years. And I think that helps not only us to develop a better strategic plan, but, counties throughout the state and throughout the United States to work on their strategic plans to make movement happen. So that's all I have to say at the moment.
Thank you. One thing a couple of things I think. We had a lot less time, and certainly we're doing this strategic plan review. So there was a lot less time for back and forth among commissioners and staff and whatnot. And it also meant that we really had to focus on the upper levels. So we can't forget, and Commissioner Hanson in a way was just alluding to this, that there are actions under the strategies And it occurred to me, when Manager Miller, you were starting the conversation on this, and you were up in and used emergency planning and mitigation as one of the examples. You know, there are some strategies like that that would probably be retained for numerous strategic plans, right? But the actions under them might well change. And that's something, and I think you know, conceptually, you're kind of covering that by saying, yeah, there's more work to do that. It's true with some of the climate change things and the resilience things. Some of the actions might move along, but the general strategy is likely to be persistent for a while because there are a number of things to be done. And so I'm very happy with a lot of things that we were able to capture, and just with the fact that we are actively reviewing and updating this plan, but it's a little bit dissatisfying to not have more time to talk about some of the actions. But I mean, recognizing that's the way it is, and so I think I want to emphasize how important it is that you said that there's more work to be done under this. So I just really wanted to agree with that. And the other thing is these plans, the development that's needed for some of the actions under these plans is where the strategic plan intersects with some of the other existing county procedures. So for example, things that are in the strategic plan that become
Somehow you got muted.
I didn't, thank you. I was like, was I muted for the whole, you were going like this?
No, just the last few minutes.
Really, I was sitting here just gesticulating and not.
No, just like 5 seconds, that's all.
Okay. Well, I guess I have ghosts in the house. I don't know. The other thing that related to that is this where the strategic plan intersects with the other processes of project development and whatnot. So, yeah, maybe that's all that has to be said. We still have a strategic, a capital planning process, and then the budget planning annually usually takes care of the O&M things that fit under that. And that's where the intersection of some of this, the action development that would fall under these strategic categories, because I think, I just think especially under the limitations we had in this planning cycle, that those to me are very, very important, because it's places where we can look to the strategic plan and then develop the projects and the capital outlay further with this as a guideline.
And Madam Chair, I want to speak to your comment about the actions. I agree with you. This board, or at least 3 of you, were actively involved in helping us build this strategic plan from a blank piece of paper. You didn't come in with something already there. So you actually were involved all the way into the discussions, developing actions. You know, some people would say, oh, a board of commissioners shouldn't be involved in the detail of the actions, but you were. And you're right that it intersects with what we do on a regular basis too, and it intersects with our capital planning. So to some degree, you need to be involved in those discussions about the specific actions, because there's only so many work hours in a day and only so many work hours in a year. And every one of these ideas takes time, takes staff time. So we have to actually get to the, well, how many things can we, there's objectives and ideas, those are great. But when you take them down to an actual action that takes time, out of a staff member's day. We need to know when we put this together, you're kind of thinking, I'm putting a strategic plan together with a human resource budget in mind, not just a dollars for a infrastructure in mind, but a human resource. And Commissioner Garcia touched on it. Well, just remember, if you go get federal money for this, you still need to have somebody who can manage the project. And Commissioner Hamilton, you and I have had conversations like, I'd love to get more of that, but I got to make sure that we can implement it. So I think that's where the actions do come into play, so that the board can see, and so can see, okay, we can only do this many things in a given work week, or in a given year, or in a given quarter, or a 5-year. It's unrealistic to think with the resources, human resources and financial resources we had, that we can do all of this. So that's where I do believe we need to have quite a bit more work on staff working on these objectives and strategies, getting them put into into language that fits an objective. So for instance, if I were to just say, create an arts and culture commission, I would say that's not necessarily an objective, that's a strategy. And we would have above that would be more like promoting more and developing local artist talent, or something like that, you know, like, or opportunities for local artists. You might be saying that might be your objective, is to grow our local art community. And then there might be some strategies. Maybe it's have a commission, maybe it's have I don't know, provide grants, maybe it's create a display space in art. Those might be some strategies or actions. So, but I think that's on county staff to go rework those and come back to you with that, with these ideas in a framework that you can then see how we would fit that into our work schedule, and vote on whether you want those things or not added to our plan. So, and I think that will also take like a great deal more staff time on it. And then it's going to take more quality time with the board going through it and getting feedback.
I agree with that completely and really appreciate those comments. And I also wanted to point out the interrelationship between several of the components of this within the strategic plan. So for example, they have things have to be listed separately to be able to be dealt with. When you think about even the priorities that you listed, taken from the planning we did, there's climate change and making a resilient county, and water supply and drought management. Those things are very strongly interrelated. Like managing for water is one of the big things the county can do to make itself resilient to climate change, because it's one of the biggest impacts, especially here in the Southwest, right? So when you're interpreting this plan, there are relationships back and forth between with the climate change things and the utilities and electric vehicles, in that approach. There's a big relationship between, and you see the point. So just in terms of interpreting the plan, the emphasis that's put in these different areas, some of them are quite related, and shows, and those relationships also show the direction of what people consider important. So, fire management and climate change, that sort of thing, emergency management. So, are there other comments at this point, or Manager? Yes, Commissioner Hanson.
So just as we were thinking about this and looking at this plan, I realize that maybe there's a possibility that we need a strategy or somewhere where it says city-county relations or city-county interaction or city-county, I don't know, just, so I don't know if that belongs in the strategic plan, because they are somebody we have to deal with no matter what. But, like, do we have certain strategies for moving forward with certain issues that we are negotiating, or I don't know if it belongs in the strategic plan or if it's just, but I just thought about it, so I just wanted to share it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Hanson, you just made me think back. As frustrating at times as the RPA was, the Regional Planning Authority, and I think because it kind of had some breakdowns in what its purpose was, but we did have a lot of subcommittees on that where, affordable housing, renewable energy, the subcommittees, actually, there was a lot of good dialogue between, two commissioners and 2 or 3 counselors in these subcommittees of the RPA. And even the RPA, at least you had 4 and 4 getting together once in a while and talking about regional infrastructure. Granted, most of it was paid for by Santa Fe County, because at that particular time, I shouldn't say it was all paid for. It was what was up for discussion was what to do with the county's GRT, not what do we do together. But there was some merit in that because we were talking as governing body to governing body. And I remember at one point, there was a request from, I think, Commissioner Anaya at the time and Commissioner Mayfield. Well, what about something that was even more regional that included the tribes and included Espanola and Edgewood? And not necessarily all on the same board per se, but so maybe something around intergovernmental collaboration, I don't know, between all of the entities that are within our boundaries. So
yeah, Madam Chair, that's kind of, there's the city county, there's the county tribes, there's the and I did think that, I know you have heard me support a regional planning office, a regional planning idea many times, and so I just wanted to throw that out at the moment as something for us to think about again and to see where and what we might be able to come up with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam
Thank
Chair, if I
you.
may also, but just to add to that, I think it should be on the plan. Let's just be all regional governments that are there in Santa Fe County. You have Espanola, you have Cochiti, you have Santo Domingo, you have Edgewood, you have Moriarty, you have Espanola, we have all our pueblos. So if we could just put a note on there saying, let's plan to work with all these entities and we'll figure out when we get there.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Commissioner Roybal, our chair, has been on for probably about 45 minutes, and he had been excused because he actually had to go up to the labs, but has finally been able to join. So I think I might, well, even though it seems trivial if we're toward the end, to turn it over to him. Chair Roybal.
Thank you, Commissioner Hamilton, and you've been doing a great job, and I just want you to go ahead and continue and finish out the meeting, and I just want to thank staff for putting this together. I do want to review the actual meeting later, and I probably will have some questions, but it's been a great conversation, and I think that we're headed in the right direction, but I do appreciate you acknowledging that I joined. So thank you, Commissioner Hamilton. And please
Oh, of
continue to
course. Will do. Thank you very much, Chair Roybal. So Manager Miller, does that cover about what we were hoping to in these items? Do you?
Madam Chair, yes, it does. I think I hope that I hope we're on target with what the board would approve as an interim budget. As I said, the minute I have some guidelines, then I can make additional recommendations. But if there's anything that we missed or anything you have concerns about, please let me know. We can also, we have an agenda item on the 11th, and I can put an agenda item just for discussion so they can get any additional direction if there's anything else that comes up that you think we need to include in the budget. And then also we'll send out the invite for the 18th. And we will go to work on getting the rest of the information and also, like I said, work on refining some proposals on the strategic plan. And then we'll come back to you to request, you know, maybe a day that we can just spend a day on, but in person in the chambers or something like that.
That'd be
strategic
cool.
plan sometime in June.
That
Okay.
sounds fabulous.
Thank you. And then I just really want to give big thanks and kudos to Yvonne and her staff for how much work they've done to get this budget together. I told her I'd take the burden of yakking the whole time if she just get all the slides together. So she has done an excellent job. And Daniel for keeping the presentation going, and everybody who's worked behind the scenes to put all this together. Tessa, Joe, and Hachi on the strategic plan notes and all the note takers. So thank you very much to the staff that and Elias who helped shepherd all that. So thank you very much to them.
I certainly want to support that. Thank you so much, Manager Miller and Yvonne and the entire staff for what I thought was a fabulous analysis, very informative, you know, very detailed but understandable, a great follow-on from the first study session, which was really useful for understanding. Really want to thank you for that. So actually, that takes us to concluding business. Does anybody have any additional announcements? Commissioner Hanson.
I want to wish you a wonderful day tomorrow on your Earth Day planting.
Yes.
Out at the Hondo Fire Station, and good luck. I'm sorry, I won't be there to join you, but I'm sure you'll have a great day.
Well, thank you. I think we're going to be planting a smaller area, but than you did, but you know, every place we can get stuff in, and you know, everybody seems to be very excited about it. Thank you for that. Are there other announcements? Yes, Commissioner Hughes.
Oh, I just wanted to thank the staff for putting all this together. And I know I didn't have that much to say today because I'm still learning this whole process, but it's very informative. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So if there's nothing else, we had all the follow-up for next steps from Manager Miller. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. And in the tradition of our esteemed regular chair, all in favor say bye.
Bye.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Yep.